One night a year he will arise, to take revenge with great despise. For vengeance he feels he must take the blood of those with lust, who wronged him many years ago, and endlessly his might will grow. So be aware when you venture out, on that night of holy doubt, and treat those shades with greater caution, for one may be the headless horseman. Shrouded in the tomeless annals of Terraria's dark ages dwells legends of fallen heroes, black magic and gothic terrors, of fearsome enemies and tyrant kings oppressing the medieval lands. But in this time of great hardship there was a beacon of hope, a legion of great mounted knights who served under a just monarch. This legion, led into battle by their king, would fight against the evil of the world, not resting until the subjects of their domain could live in peace and security. Beyond the good king's borders, however, in a mighty forest of perpetual night, a sorcerer of sinister machinations dwelt. At one point the arcane consort of a virtuous leader, he was denounced as a warlock by the Wizarding Guild, sentenced to death by his monarch for actions branded as grossly reproachful. Yet despite his apparent demise he remains close, darkening the skies with his presence, awaiting a day when he will take his revenge. Gods had begun. Humanity had all players deep and challenging, with different is less likely to get me horribly In better days past, the once trusted wizard journeyed with the great heroes, felling evil wherever it may be found. They were hardly ruthless though, and many of the Legion's foes were granted mercy if their wrongdoings were repented, which only perpetuated their just reputation. However, the sorcerer frowned upon these acts of kindness, feeling it made them appear weak, inviting attacks from much greater foes. He contended that a show of force must be made to solidify their might, and that their enemies were always better off dead. But every time his opinion was voiced, the king quelled the argument, claiming that the day we become cruel is the day when we become the enemy. Even so, the wizard persisted in his beliefs, and soon a day would come when his fears were realised. Without warning, a huge force from a previously neutral neighbouring kingdom attacked and besieged the capital. The Legion fought hard to keep their attackers at bay, but the army continued to come, relentlessly assaulting the walls until they were either pushed back or the city's defences were eroded away. With a heavy heart, the king decreed that the source of the attacking army must be defeated, lest the kingdom fall, and so it was that the full might of the Legion was unleashed and the neighbouring kingdom was razed to the ground. As the king sat upon his throne, ashamed at his victory, the sorcerer merely declared that the nation had now proved itself mighty after all. All was not as it appeared, the king decided. Everything had curiously gone as the wizard had predicted, and so he ordered an investigation into him, and soon found evidence that he had been dabbling in the dark arts. Indeed, the wizard had uncovered a source of the old cosmic corruption just outside the kingdom in a cursed wood, and found that it increased his power tenfold. So much in fact that it allowed him to influence the will of another nation's leader, making him launch the attack that would bring such turmoil. Eventually this knowledge would reach the monarch and his legion, who became enraged and immediately imprisoned the sorcerer, having his powers bound by his arcane kin. While the king decided what should be done with this traitor, the Legion put him on public display, to be ridiculed and humiliated for his actions. As word spread of his betrayal, the people of the kingdom came from far and wide to throw everything from food to feces at him. Some would even smash entire pumpkins over him, and soon this actually became a common pastime. Some even carved monstrous faces into the pumpkins, leaving them next to his cage as an effigy of the creature they saw him as. In time, the king decided that even with his powers bound, he was too dangerous to live, and for the first time in hundreds of years, there would be an execution. And so it came to be that the sorcerer was brought before the axeman, surrounded by the twisted faces carved into the pumpkins. In his last moment, as his head descended to the block, he looked around at the carvings, then at the crowd, and stated simply, "If this is how you see me, then this is how I will haunt you." Then the axe fell, and it was over. For years the kingdom continued on, still blighted by what the sorcerer had done, but in that forest the corruption churned, and the sorcerer's essence, entwined with the corruption, managed to return. He was not how he had been, however, but how he had promised to be. Gathering his power, he cast corrupt magic on the trees and creatures of the forest, turning them into horrific monsters. He animated the scarecrows in the fields of the kingdom and marched towards the capital under the light of a twisted moon. Facing the legion, the sorcerer inflicted his own fate on each of the brave knights, removing their heads, replacing them with a carved pumpkin that had been used to mock him so, and forced them into subservience. Cutting down all that stood before him, the terrifying pumpkin-faced sorcerer found the king and promised that unlike the others he would be spared, as he had spared so many others. But each year, on this night, he would have to witness the terrorizing of his people by his own loyal legion, reborn as the Headless Horseman. The sorcerer kept his word, and every year the forces of that despicable forest would befall the kingdom, and eventually all of Terraria, led by the horrifying Pumpkin, flanked on all sides by his Headless Horseman. So mighty and tireless was the Pumpkin in his endless vengeance, that even the great champion of Terraria could not truly defeat his legion, merely repel it, only for it to return the next year, and begin the terror once again. Did you enjoy that video? Good, because there's plenty more where that came from. So don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell, follow me on Twitter, check out my Patreon and merch store, and I think that's about everything.